Two men attempted to rob the Stanmore Road branch of the Westpac Bank this morning, but their haul will go down on record as one of the smallest of all time. They grabbed a money bag.
Presumed drowned, and thousands have been evacuated from the flood-stricken areas. And officials say the first priority in the morning will be to carry out makeshift repairs to bridges to try to reopen major highways. Tonight, police have sealed off the South Canterbury township of Pleasant Point, one of several areas evacuated, and its 1,200 residents are spending the night in Timaru.
The whole of South Canterbury was waterlogged today. It's the same area where no rain's fallen as drought year followed drought. Now the flood of '86 has washed away chunks of their townships, isolated farms and caused heavy stock losses. At 10:30, a civil defence emergency was declared at Pleasant Point after the usually gentle Tenafai River burst its banks and pushed aside everything in its path. Like the other rivers in the region, it couldn't hold 24 hours of rain, more than 100 millimetres, and there's more forecast. When the trucks couldn't get through, all local helicopters were seconded by the police to help with the rescue work. Civil defence authorities took details, checking them against registers. Several people were reported missing after the street-by-street evacuation, and the day's main priority was to get everyone accounted for. The water and sewage systems were washed out by early afternoon, and that prompted the plan to evacuate all the 1,200 residents of the town.
Heavy rain is still falling over much of North Otago tonight. Today's flooding is some of the worst ever seen in the area, and a number of settlements, including Hakataramia, have been evacuated. Oamaru and many other towns between the Waitaki River and Dunedin are cut off by floodwaters, although most of the rivers in the region are now dropping.
50 people were evacuated from the small township of Hakataramia, better known for its recent drought problems. The flooded Hakataramia River burst its banks late this morning, sending muddy water racing through houses and the local service station. The population was taken out by sheep truck, although a couple had to be lifted from the top of a haystack by helicopter. The floods followed heavy overnight rain, which swelled local rivers. Kurau on the Otago side of the Hakataramia is also cut off tonight, with bridge approaches washed out on either side of the town, and more rain is forecast for later this evening.
This was the North Otago settlement of Mahino at lunchtime today, with the Kakanui River raging through 6 metres above normal, the highest level ever recorded, almost a metre higher than the big 1980 flood. As the storm moved south this afternoon, rivers from the Waitaki south to Dunedin rose in similar fashion, and tonight dozens of small communities are isolated by floodwaters. State Highway 1 is awash almost anywhere it's crossed by a major stream, or even minor ones like the normally insignificant Goodwood Creek near Palmerston. The suddenness of the deluge is graphically illustrated by this flooded bridge approach at Mahino. When we shot these pictures, the sign was half covered. This is the same sign, only 10 minutes later. So far, it appears Mahino is among the most dramatically affected. For local residents of all descriptions, it was a fairly dismal day. It appears the worst may be over here. The Kakanui River is reported dropping steadily tonight, but elsewhere things are less optimistic. Further heavy rain is forecast in Otago tonight, and by this evening the only way we could get back to Dunedin past the Waikouiti River was with the help of someone to part the waters.
The world watched with fascination today as the European space probe Giotto offered mankind its closest ever look at Halley's Comet, but leaving behind a trail of destruction. Worst hit, it seems, are the farmers. Thousands of hectares of land have been gouged out by the floodwaters, and the erosion has taken with it the livelihood of many residents.
The Strathan family at Sutherlands began packing what's left of their shattered lives today after yesterday's floodwaters burst through their home and swept away their hopes of an independent, profitable future.
Well, we arrived at our neighbour's place up there uninvited and we're stuck there. Look at it. I mean, look at it. What the hell are we going to do?
What does it mean for your business?
I'm bankrupt. It's just finished what the Labor government started. That's all it is. What the hell am I supposed to do now? I've got no glass houses. My income was all washed away. Sheep are washed away. The bloody lot's gone.
Their tomatoes will now rot in the ruined glass houses. Last year they spent $15,000 looking for water. The 24-hour torrent has left behind only despair. Their memories are being packed away too, an abrupt end to a 4-year-old challenge of growing vegetables. They won't sleep here again. From the air, the force of the floodwaters is even more obvious. That force came from more than 100 millimetres of torrential rain falling within 24 hours. The catchment area couldn't hold the swelling streams which poured into the rivers carrying trees and everything else. The township of Pleasant Point remains guarded by the police. Its 1,200 residents were evacuated yesterday and are still in Timaru. There's concern about looting, but the men in blue took time to shepherd sheep from their ruined and watery pastures to drier grasses. Very few people were out and about today. Some rescued trucks and cars that had been abandoned yesterday.
Here we couldn't get out, so we had to leave our cars here and take to our scrapers down here.
It was too late to get our cars out. There was about 18 inches of water around them. So we decided to take Lindsay's golf clubs out of his boot and put in the hay shed. And when we were walking away, there's a trailer there with a cover on it. And we looked inside and there was about 5 or 6 little baby goats in it, this size. So we put one each under our arm and carried them out. And as soon as we'd done that, the trailer just floated away from while we're standing there.
Many animals didn't survive. Some farmers lost hundreds of sheep, others dozens of cattle. But the transformation of intensive and pastoral land to gouged out shingle beds means the end of animal husbandry on the plain for some time yet. Throughout the region, phone links remain broken and road services limited. An overnight curfew is being imposed on State Highway 1 between Christchurch and Dunedin. Only essential traffic will get through. The inland road from Timaru to Lake Tekapo is still closed. Savage swells cut into the roads and they're impassable over several stretches. Smaller communities and many farming families have been isolated by fallen bridges. The old Beauty Cave was an early victim. For most people, the clean-up hasn't started. Some won't be back in their homes for many days. Water and sewage systems are awash and mere remnants of an ordered life. For many people, the realisation of their enormous losses is sadly sinking in. So too is the magnitude of the work and expense ahead. And the cost, in all its terms, has yet to be counted.
Further
We hope to have a report from Dunedin a little later.
Devastating. However, houses can be rebuilt, the land can't. In some cases, farmers literally lost their farms. Where crops once grew, there's now just a gravel riverbed. No compensations big enough to replace years of development or replace stock that's been carefully bred over many years. There's still no accurate estimate of the damage in monetary terms, but it will be certainly huge. It'll be a long time before all the restructuring of roads and bridges will be completed, despite some enthusiastic provisions. Perhaps the most innocent victims were the stock. Trapped in paddocks, they faced rising waters, which in many cases cost them their lives. But farmers, such as Lindsay Beck, did as much as he could to save them.
There was a call went out to the sandbank up there, and when I got up here, his wife was busy getting the animals out. And we took 4 pigs out of the sty up there, and within half an hour, that sty flowed away in the flood. It rose that rapidly.
Have you any idea how much stock's been lost locally?
Not really. The farmer further up, he lost over 300 ewes, that I know of.
All that's left now is the wait for the water to recede, and then the long and heartbreaking job of rebuilding the remains of property and lives.
And despite the efforts of road and rail crews, flood damage will restrict travel in South Canterbury and North Otago for at least the weekend. Ralph Brown has been checking the map and the latest reports.
Most disruptive of all is the virtual closure of State Highway 1 between Temuka and just north of the Waitaki Bridge. Civil Defence has only been allowing essential light traffic through during the day, and it'll be closed to everything now until 7 in the morning. Highway 82 between Waimate and Kurau is closed. Highway 83 from Kurau back to the coast at Pukuri Junction is open, but with the AA advising caution. Highway 8 is closed. The railway's track crews will be busy between Temuka and Oamaru. The river bridge just south of Temuka won't be repaired till Monday, and there are numerous slips south of Tumaru. The Railways Corporation plans to have the full track back in use by Monday night. In the meantime, southbound passengers will catch a bus to meet the southerner at Palmerston.
Timaru's mayor, Mrs McIver, is launching an appeal for flood victims, while the Anglican Church has set up an appeal headquarters in Christchurch Cathedral. Terry Olsen reports that Anglican churches will hold special collections over the weekend.
Special assistance for the victims of South Canterbury floods is well underway at Christchurch Cathedral. The Dean of Christchurch, Dr David Coles, is the man behind the appeal, and photos straight from the scene help illustrate the devastation to people. Already, the National Council of Churches has promised $1,000, and the Association of Anglican Women have given $4,000, divided equally between South Canterbury and North Otago. Timaru churches will be distributing the money.
If previous experience is anything to go by, Christchurch people are very generous, and I would hope there'll be some thousands of dollars brought in here by the public, by visitors. We get a lot of overseas visitors coming here, as well as local people.
People of Christchurch are invited to bring their donation to the entrance of Christchurch Cathedral, where a collection box has been set up for that purpose.
And people wishing to make a postal donation can send their money to the South Canterbury Flood Appeal, P.O. Box 855 Christchurch. That's P.O. Box 855 Christchurch.
And the contractors completing the Woolston Cut drainage channel have started repairing the damage caused by yesterday's floods. The first job was plugging the hole carved by the Heathcote River, as Bill Cockram reports.
The key to repairs was waiting till low tide in the river between 3 and...
Construction. Worst hit, it seems, are the farmers. Thousands of hectares of farmland have been gouged out, and for many, livelihoods have disappeared along with the erosion. The government has announced immediate flood relief of $100,000, and Civil Defence Minister Peter Tapsell says millions more will probably be needed. But Federated Farmers says the government offer is not good enough. Chairman Peter Elworthy says the damage is far more widespread than anyone thought. Mr Elworthy showed several cabinet ministers round the South Canterbury area today, pointing out that the plight of farmers who have survived droughts and financial restructuring only to be dealt a third blow by the floods.
From a farmer's point of view, many of those farm families sort of attle beyond stress tolerance because of economic problems. I just think it is a disaster of really massive proportions. I hope the ministers recognise that. I heard the minister suggest $100,000. Now that's great to have started off a fund, and I realise that's what it is. This is $1 million many millions of dollars job because it's so extensive.
Late this afternoon, 5 members of Parliament, including the Minister of Works and the Minister of Civil Defence, paid a flying visit to South Canterbury. Mr Elworthy, along with other representatives of Federated Farmers, showed the politicians the damage. But Civil Defence Minister Peter Tapsell had no promises for the farmers.
Well, I'm quite certain that we will need to be making quite extensive assistance in due course, but that's a matter we will be looked at later.
Although the water has receded from the farms, crops and stock have been completely destroyed in many areas of South Canterbury. In one case, a farmer lost 400 head of sheep in a matter of hours. And in the towns, especially Pleasant Point and Temuka, residents have been told they cannot go back to their homes. The danger of health problems from broken sewage and drainage systems is too great.
It's essential that the water and sewage services be reinstated before there is any possibility of any of the evacuated homes in Pleasant Point being reoccupied. That is, whether they have had floodwaters through them or not.
Only specialised workers are allowed into Pleasant Point. Many of them have already been working non-stop since the floods began yesterday morning. In Pleasant Point itself, Constable Jeff Smith is still on duty, but he presides over an empty town.
Got a family. I hoped they would be all right. My wife was fielding phone calls, but she had no communication with me, and I think she just referred them either to Timaru or Temuka.
Has she been evacuated?
Yes, she's gone, and the children have all gone too.
That must be hard for you.
I've been too busy worrying about other people, and this is what happens. There were several other people in a similar position, so busy worrying about the community that tended to forget about your own family, and then later on you think, heck, where's my wife and where's my children?
We can't give any indication at all at present when people will be able to move back into evacuated homes.
Alan Tiplady is trying to administer a frantic civil defence organisation under pressure, even though the floods happened more than 24 hours ago. The key priorities are still to find people who have been isolated by the floods. More than 1,000 residents have been evacuated from Pleasant Point, and untold numbers from smaller villages up in the hills.
I've already agreed that we will make available an initial grant of $100,000 on a dollar-for-dollar subsidy to subsidise the local collection from the disaster fund. We've agreed to appoint a disaster recovery coordinator, and we'll be looking at it for a suitable person in the next day or two. And at the same time, all of the government departments, including Mr. Coleman's, are already taking steps, and we will be correlating that within the next few days.
One of the problems facing civil defence is the flood's effect on communications, especially telephone cables and main roads. State highways have been cut in dozens of places, and phones have been out in several areas north of Timaru. But when the total cost is added up, it's likely to be in terms of lost production on farms. And more seriously, it's the immediate damage done to fences, stock numbers, houses and roads in the farming areas.
Loans to farmers, as in Gisborne, and other people, householders, are just not going to be enough. Farmers just can't cope with that. So there'll have to be extensive assistance. There'll have to be assistance to get their roads and tracks and fences and capital items going again. And we just hope that the government and the community will come right in behind this, because it is a massive disaster. It's over a much wider area than anyone thought. I took an aerial swing right up through the Fairlie Basin, Mackenzie Basin, down the Waitaki, up over Waimate, and now we've looked at all the
homes today, but only for a short time. Civil defence authorities allowed them only to pick up personal belongings before they were bussed back to temporary accommodation in Timaru.
South Canterbury is fast drying out. All of Highway 1 between Christchurch and Timaru is open, except for the southern end of Temuka, where floodwaters have gouged out the bridge approach, causing main road traffic to be diverted down backcountry gravel roads. The traffic is being directed by Army personnel. Just outside of Pleasant Point at noon today, a convoy of 21 buses carrying residents were checked over by an Army roadblock. Similar roadblocks have been set up to all approaches to the village. The residents had left in a hurry on Thursday afternoon and are being housed temporarily in Timaru. The return was only for 2 hours today, just time to grab belongings from a scene which resembled more of a battle point than a pleasant one. Restoring services is a colossal job facing the council. While they clear up Pleasant Point, the residents are resigned as a fact of life that this mess will be here for some time. For the Warwoods, luck ran out on Thursday when a 4-foot wall of water surged through their home.
I didn't realise it'd be as bad as this, but I thought we were going to get a bit of water and a bit of silt on the ground, but we prepared for that. We've been allowed in now just to have a look around. pick up any little knickknacks we want.
Their next-door neighbour, Hickey Jock, and his family were rescued by helicopter from another neighbour's house.
She was flooded. I was stood inside. I swam from over there.
You swam from your house?
From that place to get my family out.
Yeah. To where? To the road here?
No, to the next door.
And you were lifted out by helicopter?
Yep.
The villagers have all gone back to their lodgings, taking what few possessions they could gather. In the meantime, the task of bringing Pleasant Point back to normal again goes on. She decided then to start baking herself, so that food and clothing and other essentials could be made available to those recently driven from their homes and waiting for the time when they'll be allowed back into them. There are 3 collection spots such as this. Mrs. Rains said she had no idea of the extent of damage and felt that something should be done for those affected in the south of the province.
So I got on the phone and I just rang, you know, about 100 friends, and I sort of ran out of that friends, so I rang workmates and their wives, and they accepted it very graciously, and they rang friends, and friends rang friends.
And neighbours and friends weren't the only ones to come in on the act. She called on the army for a truck to carry the food, and they obliged with a 20-ton truck. The truck had to call in on 2 other collection points for more food and clothing and then head south to the flood victims.
The United States Secretary of State Mr. Schultz met the Soviet Prime Minister Mr. Ryzhkov in Stockholm today, and afterwards both men agreed that relations between Washington and Moscow had deteriorated since the summit meeting in Geneva 4 months ago. Mr. Schultz and Mr. Ryzhkov were among representatives of more than 100 nations who were in Stockholm for the funeral
of $39 million. Acting Prime Minister Jeffrey Palmer says 1,000 kilometres of road and 60 bridges have been damaged and about 100 families left homeless. And many homes today, the massive job of moving out the mud went on.
The worst hit areas are under police guard 24 hours a day. It's a restricted area requiring passes to get in. These homes took the full force of the bursting Tenafai stream last Thursday morning. Now their contents have been emptied onto front lawns to dry in the hot westerlies that blew strongly all day. Inside, firemen are hosing the homes clean. They're afraid of health problems if they remain clogged with mud. The sewage system failed early in the flood, and it's expected to be many days before people will be back here to live. All the residents can do is to come and work on the clean-up for the day, share a cuppa with their neighbours and carry on.
It's a pity the neighbours have to meet each other like this. Some of them we hardly ever spoke to, and now we're meeting there as we have cups of coffee after cleaning out mud and wait for the fire brigade to...
Even as it's happening, does it seem real it's happened in Little Pleasant Point?
No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. Not at all. Can't believe it's happening here, especially when the other end of town looks so good and so normal. And then to come up here, and this is our home, and it's happened to us, not someone in Invercargill or elsewhere. It's here.
The army's come to town too, backing up emergency services which arrived from all over the province. Some workers haven't had a full night's sleep since last Wednesday.
Well, we've been working around the clock on shift work and mostly closing down at night time, but maintaining the station and then starting first thing each day.
And any specific problems that have arisen?
Not on our end of it. It's going to be a tremendous task to get all these houses cleaned up.
It's 5 days since the flood hit Pleasant Point. It seems a lifetime to many of these people whose homes have become nightmares.
And in Wellington, the government has moved to coordinate aid to the flood-stricken area. A special cabinet committee has been set up to collate information and provide help where needed most.
24 hours a day. It's a restricted area requiring passes to get in. These homes took the full force of the bursting Tenafai stream last Thursday morning. Now their contents have been emptied onto front lawns to dry in the hot westerlies that blew strongly all day. Inside, firemen are hosing the homes clean. They're afraid of health problems if they remain clogged with mud. The sewage system failed early in the flood, and it's expected to be many days before people will be back here to live. All the residents can do is to come and work on the clean-up for the day, share a cuppa with their neighbours and carry on.
It's a pity the neighbours have to meet each other like this. Some of them we hardly ever spoke to, and now we're meeting there as we have cups of coffee after cleaning out mud and wait for the fire brigade to...
Even as it's happening, does it seem real that it's happened in Little Pleasant Point?
No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. Not at all. Can't believe it's happening here, especially when the other end of town looks so good and so normal. And then to come up here, and this is our home, and it's happened to us, not someone in Invercargill or elsewhere. It's here.
Late in town.
And policing the heavens for Halley's Comet pays off for a Hornby constable.
They're trying to get back to some sort of order in Pleasant Point, but 4 days after the flood, the town still resembles a battleground. There's no sign yet of when Civil Defence can begin to consider scaling down its efforts. Bill Cockram visited Pleasant Point today and says the thing that he found most impressive was the resilience of the people and their determination to join in repairing their lives.
This is the infamous Sector 7, the most heavily affected part of Pleasant Point's residential district. You need a permit to enter Sector 7. Civil Defence is determined to ensure people's losses aren't compounded. In reality, most people have been playing the game and not attempting to circumvent the authorities, despite the understandable wish to get back to things as soon as possible.
We've had a very tight security cordon around the secure areas. We've had 2 or 3 people break the barriers. I've had reports of people going cross-country to get into the area, and a rumour of a couple of burglaries, but nothing confirmed.
How are you finding that, psychologically they're coping?
The problem is that while people have been very busy getting things going, the psychological problems haven't occurred. Now we're entering into almost a void situation, and the reality of it is going to create problems.
Do people blame anyone? Is there a feeling of resentment now, looking back and saying, well, it mightn't have happened if?
There'll always be that in any situation. I've heard rumours that certain people should have done things, but overall I don't think so. The information we have is that it was a massive flood that nobody could have controlled.
You see, I can remember in my years back here in Timaru where the Catchment Board had this wondrous new telemetry gear in the rivers, and that this was going to be the answer to this sort of thing, and yet it doesn't seem to have worked.
It doesn't seem to have worked. We unfortunately weren't advised of the water that was coming to Pleasant Point. I dare say all these matters will come out in the debriefing session.
For the outsider visiting at this time, it's difficult to take it all in. You can't talk in terms of worst affected or most loss or heaviest damage. Everyone's suffered in this sector. Houses may stand for most of them, but that's about all they've left. Little else.
Yeah, it's my garden and my personal treasures, my family bits and pieces that are replaceable. You can buy a new jug, a new car, but there's a lot of photos and letters and cards and just my garden, bits and pieces that...
Do you blame anybody at all for what's happened?
Well, everyone's trying to blame Halley's Comet, but no, not really.
Well, for Barbara's sake, I really feel for her, but as far as the other people on the street, they've all the same opinion that, everyone's mucking in and helping out, so long term, of course, it'll be all the small treasures and things that are around.
What are your sort of priorities now then? What do you have to sort out, the order?
Well, at the moment